There are some people in this world who carry their power quietly, who don't need to announce it, who don't need you to know, and then one day, someone pushes them just a little too far, and the whole room finds out exactly who they were dealing with. This is one of those stories. The lobby of the Harrington Grand in downtown Halifax smelled like cedar and money, polished floors the color of dark honey, a chandelier so large it cast shadows on the shadows. It was the kind of hotel that didn't need a sign out front to tell you it was expensive. The building did that all by itself. It was a Tuesday in late November. Cold had settled into Nova Scotia the way it always does. Not suddenly, but decisively, like it had made up its mind and wasn't entertaining any discussion. Outside, the harbor was gray and flat. Inside, people moved quietly across the lobby, luggage wheels whispering on stone. Celestine Okafor walked in at 11:47 in the morning. She was 61 years old, though she wore it the way certain women do. Not fighting it, not hiding it, just carrying it with the kind of ease that only comes from having survived a great deal and come out the other side still standing. She had a wool coat, charcoal gray, slightly worn at the left cuff, a carry-on bag rolling behind glasses pushed up on her forehead, no jewelry except small gold studs in her ears. Her shoes were practical, low heels, dark leather, the kind that could handle an airport and a long day without complaint. She looked, to the untrained eye, like a retired schoolteacher. Someone's aunt visiting for the holidays, unremarkable in that particular way that certain people are right up until the moment they aren't. She crossed the lobby to the front desk and waited. There was one other guest ahead of her, a younger man in a blue suit who was finishing up quickly. The lobby was quiet. A pianist somewhere to the left was playing something soft and unmemorable. The front desk had 2 agents on. One of them, a woman in her 40s with warm eyes and a genuine smile, was wrapping up with the blue suit man. The other agent, the one Celestine would end up standing in front of, was a man named Gareth Nolan. Gareth was 34, tall, broad-shouldered, with close-cut hair, and a face that had learned somewhere along the way to arrange itself into an expression of polite condescension so practiced it had become his resting state. He wore his hotel badge on his left lapel like a small kingdom. He had worked at the Harrington Grand for 3 years and had, in that time, developed an extremely precise internal radar for what he called, privately, the right kind of guest. Celestine did not register on that radar. She stepped up to his station when the space cleared. She set her bag to the side. She smiled, not broadly, not asking for anything, just a normal, civil smile. "Good morning," she said. "I have a reservation under Okafor." Gareth looked at her. Then he looked at his screen. He typed something. He looked at the screen again. "Okafor," he repeated, pronouncing it with a flatness that wasn't quite effort and wasn't quite disrespect, that particular register of disinterest that lands somewhere between the two. "That's right," Celestine said pleasantly. He typed. Clicked. His jaw moved slightly, the way jaws do when people are thinking something they've decided not to say yet. "Can I see your ID and credit card?" he said. Not a question. The kind of phrasing that comes from saying something so many times it has stopped being a sentence. Celestine reached into her coat pocket and produced both without hurry. She set them on the counter. Gareth picked up the ID. He looked at it for what was, by any reasonable standards, slightly too long. "This is a British Columbia ID," he said. "It is," Celestine agreed. "You're not from Halifax." She looked at him with the patience of a woman who had been answering obvious statements disguised as questions for 61 years. "I'm here for work," she said. Gareth set the ID down and turned back to his screen. He clicked through something. His brow furrowed in a way that seemed, to Celestine, slightly theatrical. "I'm seeing a reservation here," he said, "but the rate applied is our corporate tier. That requires a valid corporate verification code at check-in." Celestine nodded. "I have that. My assistant sent it through when the booking was made. It should be attached to the file. It's not showing attached. Can you check under the booking reference? It would have come through from my office." Gareth clicked once, twice. Then he leaned back slightly, crossed his arms, and looked at her with an expression that was doing its best to appear professional and mostly just appeared bored. "I can put you in at the standard rate while we sort this out," he said. "If you can get someone from your company to resend the verification, we can adjust it at checkout." Celestine tilted her head. "The difference in rate is about $300 a night," she said. "I'm here for 4 nights." "I understand that." "And the verification code was sent at time of booking 2 weeks ago." "I understand that as well, ma'am, but I don't see it in the system, and our policy is that—" "What's your manager's name?" Celestine asked, still pleasant, still calm, the tone of someone who isn't rattled, just gathering information. Something shifted in Gareth's face. Not much, just enough. "I am the senior agent on this shift," he said. "I didn't ask your position. I asked your manager's name." A small silence. The pianist kept playing. A bellhop crossed the lobby pushing a brass cart. "Her name is Vivian Hartwell. But she's not available right now. When will she be available?" "I'm not sure." "Look." He unfolded his arms and placed both hands on the counter in a gesture that was probably meant to read as helpful and landed somewhere near territorial. "What I can do is get you checked in at the standard rate now and flag the file for review. That's the best I can offer." Celestine looked at him for a moment. Just a moment. The way you look at something when you're deciding something. "Let me make a phone call," she said. She stepped back from the counter a few feet and took out her phone. It was not a new phone. It was a slightly scuffed model, 2 years old, in a plain black case. She found a contact and pressed call. She held the phone to her ear. Gareth watched her out of the corner of his eye while he made a show of clicking through his computer. His colleague at the next station, the woman with the warm eyes, whose name was Patricia, glanced over once and then looked away. Celestine's call connected. She spoke quietly, briefly, in the measured tone of someone who is used to being heard the first time. She said 3 sentences. She ended the call. She put the phone back in her pocket and returned to the counter. "Someone will be calling the front desk in a few minutes," she said. "I'd suggest you answer it." Gareth opened his mouth. He closed it. He looked at her coat. He looked at her carry-on. He looked at the reading glasses on her forehead and the worn cuff of her left sleeve and the low, practical shoes and the plain black phone case. "Is there something else I can help you with in the meantime?" he said. "Just standing here," Celestine said, and folded her hands in front of her. The phone at the front desk rang 4 minutes later. Patricia answered it first, on instinct. But then her face changed. A particular change. A sudden shift in posture that happens when a person realizes a conversation has gone somewhere they didn't expect. And she said, "One moment, please," and held the receiver out to Gareth with an expression he couldn't quite read. He took it. He said, "Front desk, this is Gareth." The voice on the other end was a man's voice, unhurried, clear, the kind of voice that has spent years in boardrooms and learned not to raise itself. Gareth's face did something interesting over the next 45 seconds. It went still. Then it went careful. Then it went, very briefly, pale, a specific shade of pale that has nothing to do with temperature. "Yes," he said. "Yes, sir, I understand. Of course." A pause. "Yes, she's standing right here." He looked up at Celestine. She was watching him with the same expression she'd had since she walked in. Patient. Unhurried. Waiting. Gareth set the receiver down slowly. He turned to his computer. He began typing with a very deliberate, very focused energy. The energy of a man who has suddenly found it extremely important to be helpful and is trying not to let the urgency of that show. "Mrs. Okafor," he said, "I found the corporate verification. It was filed under a slightly different reference number. My." Celestine said, "Your rate will reflect the full corporate discount for all 4 nights." He clicked again. "And I'd like to offer you a complimentary upgrade to one of our Harborview suites, at no charge, for the inconvenience." Celestine said, "That's fine." He printed the key cards. He slid them across the counter in the little paper sleeve. His hand, if you were watching closely enough, had a slight stiffness to it, the kind that comes from holding yourself carefully. "Is there anything else I can do for you today?" he asked. Celestine picked up the key cards. She put them in her coat pocket. She picked up her carry-on. "One thing," she said. "Of course. Your manager, Vivian Hartwell. I'd like to speak with her before I leave for my meetings this afternoon. Please let her know." A pause. "I will," Gareth said. "Thank you," said Celestine Okafor. and she walked across the lobby toward the elevators now. I need to stop here and tell you something about Celestine, because the story doesn't make complete sense without it. Celestine Okafor was born in Lagos in 1964. She came to Canada at 23 on a graduate scholarship to Dalhousie University. Right there in Halifax, a fact that would have been interesting to Gareth Nolan if he had known it, which he didn't, because he hadn't asked, because he had looked at her and decided he already knew what he needed to know. She had spent the next 36 years building something, not loudly, not in the way that gets profiles written about it or plaques put up in lobbies. The kind of building that happens through decades of early mornings and quiet decisions, and being the only person in the room who looks like you and choosing, every single time, to stay in the room. She had worked in labor standards and workplace regulation for the Government of Canada for nearly 2 decades. She had served on 3 federal review boards. She had written the framework used in 4 provinces, including Nova Scotia, for investigating systemic discrimination complaints in the hospitality and service industry. The man she had called from the lobby of the Harrington Grand was the Deputy Minister of Employment and Social Development, whose cell number she had saved in her phone because they had worked together for 11 years, and she had been to his daughter's wedding. She was in Halifax for a 4-day inspection of hospitality sector compliance across the province. The Harrington Grand was on the list. It had not, until that morning, been at the top of the list. It was now. Vivian Hartwell met Celestine in the lobby at 1:15 that afternoon, 30 minutes before Celestine was scheduled to leave for her firstest meeting of the day. Vivian was 51, sharp-eyed, with the particular energy of a person who has managed a luxury hotel long enough to have seen every kind of situation and to have developed very good instincts for which ones required immediate damage control. This one, she had determined within approximately 90 seconds of the morning's phone call, required immediate damage control. She apologized, genuinely, specifically, without the hollow, circular language people use when they're apologizing for getting caught rather than for what they did. She mentioned the upgrade and said it was the very least the hotel could do. She mentioned that the matter of the verification code would be reviewed, and that she was personally looking into how the morning's check-in had been handled. Celestine listened. She was wearing different shoes now, slightly more formal, and had a leather portfolio tucked under her arm. She nodded when Vivian spoke. "I appreciate that," Celestine said. "I want to be clear about something. I'm not here in an official capacity in terms of this hotel specifically, not yet. I'm here as a guest. What happened this morning was not unique to me, and it's not unique to this property, and I'd like you to understand that I know that." Vivienne was quiet. "But I'll tell you what I told your agent before I left the desk," Celestine continued. "The way a person is treated when no one is watching, when there's no badge visible, no title announced, that's the real policy. Whatever it says in your handbook, that's the policy being practiced on the floor, and it matters." She let that sit for a moment. "I'll be back in the morning," she said. "I'd like to schedule a brief conversation with your team leads before I leave on Friday. I'll have my office send the formal request this afternoon." Vivienne said, "Of course. We'll make ourselves available." Celestine nodded once, picked up her carry-on from beside the chair where she'd left it, squared her coat. "One more thing," she said. "Yes, the agent this morning, Gareth." Vivienne's posture changed very slightly. "Yes, don't fire him." Vivienne blinked. "Not because what he did was acceptable," Celestine said clearly. "It wasn't. But firing him doesn't change anything except who does it next. What changes things is making sure he understands what he did and why it's a problem. Make him understand it. That's worth something. Firing him just moves the problem somewhere else." She picked up the portfolio. "I'll see you tomorrow morning," she said, and she walked out through the front doors into the gray Halifax afternoon. Gareth Nolan sat in Vivian Hartwell's office for an hour and 40 minutes that afternoon. He didn't talk about it afterward, not in the way people don't talk about things because nothing happened, but in the way people don't talk about things because something happened that they're still sitting with, turning over, looking at from different angles in the quiet of their own mind. What he could tell you, if you asked him on the right day, was that Vivienne had shown him a document, a federal policy framework, with an author listed on the first page. A name he recognized from the front desk, from the ID he'd held a little too long, from the low practical shoes. And that was the moment, not the phone call, not the upgrade, but that document, when the full weight of the morning settled onto him like something physical. Not shame exactly, worse than shame. Understanding. The understanding that he had looked at a woman and seen what he expected to see rather than what was there. That he had made her prove herself to a system she had helped build. That his certainty, his casual, unexamined certainty about what she was and wasn't, was the exact mechanism that her life's work had been designed to address. He thought about that for a long time. He thought about it the next morning when he came in for his shift and saw her cross the lobby again, this time with 2 other people from a federal office, headed toward the meeting room where his team leads were waiting. She didn't acknowledge him. Not pointedly. Not even particularly. She just walked past the front desk the way guests do, without looking, because the front desk is furniture when you know where you're going. But he noticed, and something about that, about being furniture to someone he had made an obstacle of, stayed with him in a way that the reprimand hadn't. I want to ask you something, and I want you to think about it honestly. How many times have you been in a lobby, or a waiting room, or a check-in line, and watched someone be made to prove themselves, made to justify their presence, their rate, their right to stand where they were standing, and said nothing? Not because you approved, but because it wasn't your business, or it would have been awkward, or you weren't sure you were reading it right. And how many times was it a person who looked like Celestine being looked at the way Gareth looked at her? I'm not asking to make you feel guilty. I'm asking because Celestine herself said it, in an interview a few years before this story, said that the silence of bystanders is its own kind of architecture. That bias doesn't just live in the person doing it. It lives in every room that allows it to happen without comment. She said, "No one needs a badge to deserve basic dignity. The badge just makes some people feel like they've been caught." Celestine Okafor left the Harrington Grand on a Friday morning. She left a 1-page written summary for Vivienne Hartwell. She went back to Ottawa. She filed her report the following week. The hotel received a formal compliance notice 3 months later. Training was mandated. An anonymous complaint process was established for guests who experienced differential treatment at check-in. Gareth Nolan completed the training. He stayed in his position. Whether he changed, really changed, at the level that matters, is the kind of thing that takes years to know and doesn't announce itself. But here's what I think. I think people change when they're made to actually see something, not punished, not humiliated. Seen, and then made to see. That's harder. It takes longer. It's less satisfying to watch, which is probably why we don't tell as many stories about it. But it's the version that sticks. If this story made you think of someone, a moment you witnessed, an experience you lived, a lobby you stood in and felt the air shift, I want to hear it. Leave it in the comments. Not the polished version, the real one. And if you know someone who needs to hear that their quietness is not the same as their smallness, share this with them, because sometimes the most important person in the room is the one no one thought to look twice at. Thank you for being here. I'll see you in the next one.